Hello, everybody. Hello, cohort. It's Megan Torrance again, and it is good to see you for this, the 7th session in our 12-week xAPI Spring 2022 Learning Cohort. I'm super excited to have you here. I have my xAPI coffee, and I am ready to rock. I hope you are also enjoying your coffee, your snack, your whatever, your second breakfast, third lunch, break of the day, and are in for a really interesting and useful session today with Jason Haag from Veracity, talking about planning your xAPI data collection requirements. And he and I were talking backstage around, before xAPI profiles, we all just it was the Wild West. We did things our own way. We tried really hard to be as consistent as possible, but there weren't rules and guidelines for making that happen. And so having some of those expectations, and then how that informs our work, right? Once we figure out, yes, I can collect data, then I really have realized that I need to organize that data and make sure that I have it meaningful, or have a plan for my data so it can be meaningful. So let's get started here today. As I said, this is web session number 7 on March 3rd, and this session is being recorded. So let's take a look at xAPI at a glance. A number of people are new each session. We have a few new people, or new people listening to the recording. So we like to go over that. What is xAPI? And what is Cohort? Not what is xAPI. What is Cohort? So that it's a warm and welcoming place to get started. So this is really all about how do we welcome people into the community. I have for a really long time talked about xAPI as being like a fax machine, which of course makes some people just roll their eyes, because there's a lot of reasons why it's not anything at all like a fax machine. But if you think about a fax machine, it's not very useful unless all your friends also have fax machines, right? And so that's really been my impetus around the xAPI cohort, is really bringing more and more people into the community so we can get more and more traction and start using this data. But when the data is interoperable, right, more people using it, it needs to be interoperable. That's exactly what we're talking about today. So we have 806 people signed up for this cohort. We are well over 4,000 people since we started doing this in the fall of 2015. I am Megan Torrance, as I mentioned. Jamie Washington is our producer and social media expert and emailer behind the scenes. If you are getting your weekly emails from Jamie because you are signed up for the cohort, she's the one who's sending them. So thank you, Jamie, for making this all easy. Matt Cleaver is also behind the scenes, making sure that your questions are answered, but also making sure that some of the technical infrastructure behind the cohort is working just fine for you. And then the xAPI Gnome, who is still in my suitcase because I took the Gnome with me to the Training Magazine conference this week. Otherwise, the Gnome usually sits up there. The Gnome is the Twitter handle that you can follow in order to stay in tune with what's going on. And like we say every week, unless it has been explicitly stated otherwise, which it so far has not, all cohort projects that you may do are under the Apache 2.0 software license for open source. And effectively what that says, I'm not a lawyer, is that you are more than welcome to share your ideas, use each other's ideas, but you may not sue each other for bad ideas, so or bad code. So go ahead and engage, have a good time here, and be nice to each other. It is never too late to join Cohort. So invite your friends, build your social network, invite your boss, invite your new hires and your recruits to join Cohort. We will, after Jason's presentation, have team updates. So team updaters, you know who you are. I may not even know who you are, but what you will do is you'll need to make sure your microphone is connected. Well, if you are a team updater, it's entirely possible that you have heard my spiel already. Therefore, you can spend this time now before Jason's talk, because you haven't heard his spiel. This one's brand new. Go up and use that settings gearbox to make sure that your microphone and your camera are all set to go so that it's super, super smooth and we don't have any awkward silences while we're doing our team updates. I have been collecting your updates from Slack and from GitHub, so thank you, teams. That's been very, very helpful to get those. So let's talk about what Cohort is. Cohort is a free and virtual, vendor-neutral, 12-week learning by doing, project-based team learning experience and community. And I focus on a different part of this definition every week, and I want to talk about the community because the community is where it's at, and it's something that's really very front and center to me, right, these days. So there are several people, you know who you are, who have either posted jobs and found new hires in the Cohort Slack channel, or you've responded to a job posting in the Cohort Slack channel, or you learned about Cohort, you tried things out, you made a project, or you just attended the weekly web sessions, and in your most recent job interview, they were able to ask you, what have you been learning lately? And you said, I've been learning about xAPI in the cohorts, and that's part of what, in addition to your stellar personality and your fantastic resume, helped get you that job. But here's the thing, the community is really powerful and strong. There's tons and tons of resources in there and tons of people who can help. And I was really excited at the training conference this week. The Training Magazine has their Apex Awards where you can apply, your team or your project can win an award, and they have a big fancy black tie gala, and it's a big deal. And the #1 winning company, right, this year, Medical Solutions, one of their teammates, right, Brianna White, has been in Cohort. And so after they won, she came and she sought me out and wanted to share that one of the things that she was able to bring back to her team was what she learned at Cohort. And that just absolutely made my day. In the meantime, we also have project teams and weekly web sessions. So that Slack channel is not just community, it's also where the project teams get their work done. And then we have weekly web sessions here. Jamie sends out a weekly email with updates and the recordings of the web sessions along with bonus links. When you are signed up for the cohort, you get these bonus links and the recordings and stuff in your email box every week. So go ahead and be sure that you are signed up in order to make sure that that goodness keeps arriving in your box. Here we are in week 7. We are solidly in the build and tune the ecosystem part of our curriculum. And Jason Haag's here with resources for planning your xAPI data collection requirements. Yes, if you're looking at that and said, wow, that should have been the first session, probably. But now everybody knows enough about xAPI to know that you know you can get a lot of data really, really fast, so it's time to have them organized. So those of you who are not getting emails, do me a favor, check in your spam box. And otherwise, you can email us at xapicohort@torranceLearning.com, and we can help you troubleshoot because those emails are pretty darn awesome. We're also in the design, build, test, get help, and repeat phase of the project teams. And so you'll hear about that a little bit as we do our project team demos. One thing I also wanted to, speaking of demos, point out, right, next week we have Stella Lee with data ethics, also really important topic. And then we get into the seeing it in action part of the ecosystem. So we have 2 case study days, people who are part of the cohort, but they're actually going to be telling us about their work outside of the cohort. So real live work using xAPI, so I'm very excited about that. We'll then have team demos, so instead of just team updates, team demos, and then demo fest, and then xAPI party. So let's talk about all the demo opportunities, because now that we have a lot of them, it might get confusing. Okay, xAPI cohort team demos. During the regular weekly cohort sessions, there's some of the coolest sessions because we get to see what you're working on, right? Each team will have an opportunity to present for about 10 minutes. It's a fast 10 minutes. And we get to see a little bit about what you've been working on. And that is super exciting. So that's over here, right? Quick project team demos. March 31st and April 7th. I will, in a week or two, reach out and ask, which date would you like? You can pick until they get full. Then a few weeks later, at the Learning Solutions Conference, Learning Solution has a Demo Fest competition. What I love about Demo Fest is you get to stroll around and see everybody's projects, but it's also a competition, which is pretty cool, with a prize and a trophy. So Demo Fest this year has a category. I don't know exactly what it's going to be named, but it's basically personal projects, which is student projects, cohort projects, or whatever it is that you've been working on in the background, right? And your side thing, you can demo that at Demo Fest. Now, in order to demo at Demo Fest, you need to be a paying customer at Learning Solutions Conference, which is awesome because it's a great conference. And for those of you who live in cold places, it's in Orlando in the springtime, so it's warm, it's lovely. And we are sharing coupons, and the early bird rate is actually going to be open for another week. So go ahead and you can get, between the coupon and the early bird, you can get $150 off of your Learning Solutions Conference registration. And then you can be invited to participate in Demo Fest. It would be great to see some cohort projects there. That's a live only event, so there's not a virtual component to Demo Fest. And then on the far right, we have xAPI Party. xAPI Party is kind of like the capstone to xAPI Cohort, although Party includes presentations and sessions from folks who didn't participate in Cohort. So it's kind of like a Venn diagram. You can do Party and not Cohort, you do Cohort and not Party, but where they overlap, there's lots of goodness. And that means goodness for project teams who have a guaranteed spot to present if you want for 20 minutes or even the whole 45-minute session if you'd like. I am a huge fan of putting yourself out there and presenting at the xAPI Party. It is a great opportunity to get your work seen, to get a recording that you have for your portfolio, for your resume, for your future conference applications. If you're submitting a proposal for other conferences, you can say, hey, I spoke at the xAPI Party. And the world actually cares about what you're working on. People are really interested. So that's super cool too. So I would like to invite to the stage Jason Haag from Veracity, who is going to talk to us about planning your xAPI data collection requirements. Jason, you have until about quarter of the hour, and I will serve up questions for you at the end if there are any, or there probably will be some, but it's helpful if I stop screen sharing myself.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks so much, Megan. I really appreciate the invite for me to come and talk to you all today about xAPI data collection requirements. And thanks again to the whole Torrance Learning team for hosting this and facilitating it. It's such a valuable resource here for the community. It proves to be every year out. So happy to be involved. Let me share my slides here. You know, if you guys can see them. Can you see them yet?
Yes, we can see them. Sorry, okay. I had clicked all the wrong buttons to get back here to tell you that. You got it.
Okay, great. So thanks. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Jason Haag. A little background about myself. I've been in our L&D space here for over 20 years now. Been heavily involved in learning technology standards for most of my career, and have been really focused on SCORM and xAPI specifically. I'm currently a partner at Veracity Technology Consultants, and we offer software and professional services for learning and development, including our learning record store, which some of you may have heard of or used. It's called Veracity Learning. And so what do I mean here in my title? Don't just give me all the data. I'm sure you've heard that in some memes or other articles out there, and give me all the data. Well, as you all know, xAPI allows us to collect data about any type of activity. But does that mean you should? Should you really generate lots of xAPI statements for every possible type of interaction and then expect to make sense of it and find some useful data later on after stored in LRS? That can be costly, both in terms of data storage and your time. It takes a lot of time to sift through all the noisy data, and it can be like trying to find a needle in a haystack if you don't plan carefully and think about what data you should be collecting. Another point that I'm trying to make here is that the quality of xAPI statements is extremely important. In other words, you should prioritize and think about quality over quantity. So I'll provide several tips and resources for thinking about collection requirements on these kind of angles here. And ultimately, support your reporting and evaluation strategy. After all, that's why we're using xAPI in the first place, right? To evaluate learning outcomes and make sure they're improving performance or making an impact on our business and mission and objectives. So let's get started here. Here's the agenda. I've organized everything into these key areas, starting with evaluation strategy, then talking about measurement, and then focusing on the data collection requirements. And then I'll provide some resources at the end to wrap things up. So let me start off by saying we are all guilty of doing this, but and sometimes it's a victim or we're at will of the authoring tools. But rather than starting right out of the gate with a list of verbs you might use or a list of activity types or what statements you should generate or even what profiles you can reuse, a more pragmatic approach would be to start with the end in mind, which is evaluation. You really can't seriously come up with practical xAPI data collection requirements until you truly understand the evaluation strategy, which should also drive what you measure and what data you collect. So what is evaluation and why should you have a strategy? Well, evaluation is actually the E part of the ADDIE model, an acronym, and it's the most neglected afterthought, or I should say forgotten part of the infamous ADDIE model, or PADDIE for those of you that like to include the planning phase, and kudos to you that do that. Evaluation should really be addressed and strategized in the beginning of your project during the planning phase, but it often isn't. Evaluation provides the feedback loop necessary to determine whether learning or training is effectively doing the job it was designed to do. And measuring and then evaluating the effectiveness of your learning and training is a continuous process. It's not a one and done event. Throughout my career in L&D, I've participated or seen many projects where a course was delivered to an LMS and then there was never any follow-on evaluation as to whether it was effective or whether there were things that could be improved based on feedback. It was simply delivered in the LMS, deployed to learners, and then forgotten about. And many clients would ask for maybe some basic reports such as total completions and scores, but they never really analyzed whether the content was making an impact. I know that's often the case with scorm content, as some of you know, as many LMSs didn't have very useful reports or metrics out of the box back in the old days. And even though scorm actually did allow for tracking quite a bit of information beyond just completions and scores. Another problem is that the data was often stuck in the LMS and there was no way to get it out and share it with other reporting tools. So this is one of the many reasons why xAPI was created and one of the many problems it was designed to solve. So with that in mind, going back to evaluation, I have a little short poll here for the audience regarding evaluation. And I believe you guys are going to share that up on the screen. But the first question I have here is, how often does your client or organization evaluate learning and training? And note this can be for an individual solution or the entire program. And I'll wait a few seconds for that poll. I don't know if we'll show the results now or maybe at the end. And I have a second poll question here.
You know what? Let me see if I can find where that poll is. Hold on.
Okay. And the second one is, do you plan to use xAPI as part of your data collection and evaluation strategy?
Hi, everyone. If you look over where the chat box is on the right-hand side, you should see an option to look at the polls.
Do we have to click the view polls? Ah, yes.
Yeah, and I see somebody found it. So.
And we don't have to wait for the results now. If you want, I'll just keep pressing through, and maybe we can look at those at the end. It'd be interesting to see.
We'll go ahead and put both polls up there. So if you find it, you can go ahead and vote.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll keep pressing here. So in thinking about the history of SCORM and making the transition to xAPI, the technical part of xAPI often excites us immediately because it's so much easier and can support a lot more use cases than your courses in an LMS. For example, to gain an understanding, I know we often want to jump right in and create a prototype and immediately play with the tech stack and generate some xAPI statements. Or maybe you're using an authoring tool. It makes it easy to generate a bunch of xAPI data automatically for you. And then you see the statements being stored in the LRS, and you get some instant gratification out of it and feel accomplished. But is the data really any good? We assume it is, but the truth is that many authoring tools implement xAPI differently, and they implemented xAPI, back when it was tin can, before profiles came out. And I'll get into profiles later, but the point here is that don't assume the data generated, by your authoring tool is of a high quality, because it's, we've seen a lot of times it's not. And you really should determine whether the data generated will support your reporting goals. Is it aligned to your evaluation strategy? It's not a bad idea to take a step back and think about, what are your reporting goals up front, and what types of things should we measure to support these reporting goals before you even design or generate your first xAPI statement. In order to figure out those goals for reporting, you also need to think about, who are your leaders? Who are your decision makers for evaluating the reports later on? Is it a customer, a CLO, a department head, or maybe it's you? Maybe you're the learning experience designer, a developer, and you're thinking about what you'd like to see. But you'll want to get the decision maker input for determining the reporting goals too. This will definitely make it easier for the design process when you need to connect the training or learning objectives to the broader evaluation goals also. It's not a bad idea to also start with an existing evaluation model or framework. It might not be possible to measure all 4 levels of the Kirkpatrick model at the moment, or ever, depending on the type of content and other factors such as access to HR data or non-xAPI data, cultural challenge, and so forth. The good news is you can start with a framework that best suits your needs and tweak it to fit your requirements. So Kirkpatrick model, which has been around for decades here in our L&D field, is a useful framework for informing your evaluation strategy. And there's 4 levels to it. Level 1 is reaction, which is, to what degree do participants react favorably to the learning event? That's typically measured with like surveys. Level 2 is learning, which is, to what degree do participants acquire the intended knowledge, skills, or abilities based on their participation in the learning event. Level 3 is, to what degree do participants apply what they learned during training or the learning content back on the job to bring about level 4 results. And then level 4 results are, to what degree are the targeted outcomes occurring as a result of the learning or training events. And there are updated versions of the framework also, such as tweaking Kirkpatrick to add a level 0, which I think is perfect for general xAPI interactions. And I'll get into that into a few slides later. And then there's a level 5 that can be added for thinking about return on investment, which is probably the most optional level and requires access to a lot of non-xAPI data. It's not always applicable to all organizations. That not everyone needs to measure, Roy. And by the way, the Kirkpatrick model was never intended to be linear or to be followed in sequence from levels 1 through 4. Some people accidentally start down that path, but it's probably because the levels were traditionally numbered 1 through 4, and you naturally want to follow something that's ordered. But in recent decades, clarifications of the model actually suggest starting with level 4 first, results. And that's why in the first slide I mentioned start with the end in mind. You need to identify the results you want to achieve first and then work backward. So, but in many cases, you may not need to follow a framework or even conduct a comprehensive evaluation or figure out return on investment. But you should always think about measuring the effectiveness of your content to see if it's working or if there are ways to improvement. And you'll likely need to provide evidence that it's of value and impact on business at some point. So it's a good idea to be proactive and think about this in the beginning. If you think about it, when budgets get tight and costs are cut, programs that don't provide any evidence of their value are often the first ones to go. And thinking about our reporting and evaluation goals, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario here. Let's say a company is constantly losing help desk employees, and there were some exit interviews conducted, and they identified one of the primary reasons or causes of this turnover is to be a lack of training and support resources to effectively do their job. So let's imagine some new training and performance support resources were created to make the employees better prepared and equipped. We need to know how much the new materials are being used, how are they being used, and then correlate that usage of the new materials back to on-the-job performance. So as a decision maker, here are some examples of things I might want to see reports on. Have we reduced the new hire turnover by a specific percentage? How are the employees using the new materials to help them perform the job? Is there an increase in response time and satisfaction scores for help desk tickets, after the training and performance support was implemented? Another one might be, what areas are employees having the most difficulty in when performing their job based on using the new tools and resources? And these can all translate back into key performance indicators. KPI is any type of metric that reflects how well an organization is achieving its goals. And these reports around usage can easily translate into measures of efficiency supported by xAPI. So what did I mean on the last slide by measures of efficiency? Well, it's a type of measure that's actually directly taken from the TDRP, Talent Development Reporting Principles Framework, which I've been digging into a lot lately. It's a really great book and reference that I'll provide at the end of this presentation. But using the TDRP framework is very helpful for framing the reasons why you want to measure, and it naturally builds from your evaluation strategy, kind of working backward as we were suggesting earlier. And then here are the reasons from the TDRP framework that you may want to measure: to inform, which is about sharing activity, identifying trends, answering questions, identifying opportunities for improvement; to monitor, which implies that a manager or leader wants to assess whether a particular measure is meeting the threshold or how the results compare to a previous threshold or benchmark; to analyze or evaluate, which is how to determine the effectiveness of the training and demonstrate its value. And then the last reason for measuring is to manage, which implies you have a committed strategy to actively managing the program or project throughout the year and deliver data results regularly. Of course, you may have multiple reasons for measuring. You might, in fact, have all these reasons. TDRP also covers different types of measures, which fall under three main categories: efficiency measures, effectiveness measures, and outcome measures. Efficiency measures provide insight into the quantity of training or learning being delivered and measures things like utilization or usage, and can also include inputs from external sources, such as like HR data or maybe even help desk metrics, like I was mentioning earlier. Effectiveness measures provide insight in the quality of the program or products using the models, such as Kirkpatrick. And then outcome measures demonstrate the impact of learning on business or HR goals. You'll notice in the next slides, some of these reasons and types of measures I have bolded. So this is a sample table of examples I put together for thinking about xAPI data collection requirements. It's organized by the Kirkpatrick levels, but then it also kind of borrows example measures from the TDRP framework. So just for this presentation, I'm just covering levels 0 through 2 in these examples, since 3 and 4 will likely require other data sources and tools than just xAPI. It's important to note that not everything can be instrumented and measured with xAPI, and that's okay. Some assessment data may be in other formats already, or some things are just, simply cost prohibitive or proprietary. So don't get hung up on, xAPI data only in your evaluation strategy. I'm just kind of focusing on that for this presentation, since it's the focus of the cohort. So let's look at each of the columns here. The Kirkpatrick levels kind of help us think about how to organize things. And the measures column helps us think about the types of things we can measure. So some examples of efficiency measures or utilization at level 0 are things like total users, access to videos, pages, menus, links, searching for terms or resources, number of attempts, number of completions, duration, time spent. And then some examples of effectiveness for measures for level 1 are things like satisfaction with accessing the performance support resources. Another example here is like satisfaction with the learning materials, and it doesn't have to be 80%. You can kind of dictate that, or rating 80% or higher satisfaction overall rating with the instructor or person facilitating. So, in thinking about the hypothetical scenario I presented earlier, we want the data we collect to answer those reporting goals, which can help you figure out what to measure. For example, how are new employees using the new materials to help perform their job? We can find this out at level 0 through utilization metrics by measuring inputs, activity, engagement with the content. We also want to see an increase in response time and improved scores for help desk tickets. So we could combine the new xAPI utilization data with external data sources such as current metrics from the help desk after new training and performance support have been put in place. We also want to know what areas were employees having the most difficulty and performing their job when using new resources and tools. We can find this out looking at level 0 utilization metrics, but also following up with level 1 surveys or interviews. And by the way, survey data can be collected with xAPI similarly to knowledge-based assessments by using CMI.interactions. It's a specific type inside of the xAPI data model, and these are well defined in the xAPI specification. In the appendix, there's some examples if you haven't seen them before. So data could also be collected from the LMS or some other assessment tool if it was collected there as well. Doesn't have to be an xAPI. Sometimes there's organizations have lots of different tools for assessment. Notice in the data collection requirements column, we're going to use those efficiency measures as a way to identify what types of xAPI interaction data we want to collect. Each of those efficiency measures can easily map or translate into xAPI statements. Now let's look at level 2, learning. As learning experience designers, most of you are familiar with level 2 solutions, such as developing training, content, or performance support materials. And level 2, you typically want to measure whether knowledge has increased, skills were improved, or attitudes changed. And here's some ways you can measure those. For increases in knowledge, requiring pre-test and post-test assessments, so you compare the results and determine if they gain any knowledge. For skills improvement, requiring a performance or observational assessment to determine whether learners acquired new skills. This would typically be conducted by an instructor or a supervisor, and would assess the learner after participating in hands-on activities or labs. You could also measure this through scenario-based assessments. And some examples of effectiveness measures here for knowledge are, test item analysis, which can inform improvements to the quality of the content, pass-fail rate, average score, standard deviation, first attempt pass rate, pre-test and post-test score comparison. And then for skills or abilities improved, you've got total or percentage of problems recognized, total correct actions, correct order of actions taken in sufficient time, overall performance. These are all things you could track with xAPI and translate into statements. So notice the data collection column, data collection requirements column over here are typically going to primarily leverage the results of assessments and using existing xAPI profiles where possible. General pre-test and post-test with CMI interactions are already well defined, as I mentioned earlier. So are things like scenario-based simulations. I think there's a profile that we could leverage. However, performance-based assessments don't currently have a profile defined, so we'll need to define new requirements for that and that type of assessment. And by the way, I'm currently researching those requirements for a performance-based assessment profile, and I think it'll be valuable to others in the community to leverage xAPI's substatement data model, which allows, I don't know if any of you have dug into that, but substatements allow for statements about statements to be generated. So for an example, an instructor, a supervisor, or other person performing the observation would have a statement generated as evidence that they observed the person demonstrating their skill or ability. So this type of profile could have, be even more applicable and used for level 3, which is behavior evaluations, where you might want to measure how learners actually applied what they learned when they're back on the job. So it has huge implications there as well. All right, so your data collection requirements should build from your measurement strategy, and then ultimately results or business impact of what you want to measure should drive your requirements. As I mentioned earlier in previous slides, you can leverage existing profiles. They already have predefined statement templates and data points. And if your requirements can't be met by an existing profile, then you can create a new one or simply define your requirements in a planning document. It's not a bad idea to come up with some type of broader data collection plan documentation that includes other data sources besides xAPI too, to kind of help you think through this. Defining an xAPI profile is a form of a data collection plan, but it's really just only focused on xAPI data, of course. Since we're focused on xAPI for this cohort, let me briefly jump into profiles here. And I believe it was covered in a previous week, so I'm not going to go super deep, but I'll really just kind of talk at a high level and some of my experience with it here. In a nutshell, I think a profile is really your blueprint for implementing xAPI consistently, which is extremely important for your analytics and reporting later on. So profiles help you establish a common vocabulary and semantics and determine what data should be captured and stored to meet your reporting and your visualization requirements. So thinking back several years ago, this was actually how some of the statement requirements for the video profile were realized. For example, the community of practice for the video profile, we met regularly, I believe it was monthly, and we defined several reporting requirements for different types of video interactions or engagements, such as it'd be really neat to see, a heat map that showed where users would fall off or would only watch specific segments of a video. The heat map visualization was kind of the driver, but like think about it, this type of engagement with a video could be correlated back to how they performed in a test that's measured specific learning and performance objectives in that segment of the video. There are several existing profiles out there already that provide statement templates and guidelines for implementing xAPI for a specific type of content or in a specific context. And you can check out some of these existing profiles at ADL's profile server if you already don't know about it. The URL is here in the slides. I just heard from ADL earlier today that this URL is actually going to change. They're migrating it to profiles.adlnet.gov. So didn't get a chance to update these slides yet, but this URL will redirect there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. A little more on profiles. They're based on a very technical specification And that spec is a companion to the core xAPI specification. So they're kind of separate, both going through the IEEE standardization process. The core spec is a lot closer. The profile spec is, like I said, very technical and incorporates JSON linked data as a requirement. In the past, it was highly error prone to manually, generate these JSON LD files for a profile. And that's one of the primary reasons why ADL recently developed this profile server resource last year. You can now more easily author profiles using like a GUI interface, as well as like search and reuse existing profiles. And another recommended resource for profiles is Torrance Learning's Profile Flattener. I think this tool is very helpful too, because it displays the statement requirements and then the optional elements in an appealing kind of bulletized format for each profile. So check that out as well. Okay, let's talk about other resources for documenting your data collection requirements. While ADL's profile server makes it easier to author a profile and turns your profile into a machine readable document, it's actually helpful to create a human readable document outside the profile server first. And developers and programmers that implement xAPI or implement your xAPI profile will definitely appreciate this document too, because it's easier for humans to read. So I recommend starting with a document format that's easily accessible and editable, such as Microsoft Word or Google Docs. And I created a Word doc template that you can download here at this shortened URL. My company, Veracity, recently documented several profiles using this approach for our clients and made this template available as a free resource. And the template provides you with like a bulletized list of requirements for each statement, and then provides an area to draft statement example based on those requirements too. And then these requirements form the foundation for your statement templates in a profile. If you need to create a new profile, you can still use the ADL profile server or Torrance Learning's Profile Flattener to help you identify and select the concepts you may want to reuse as input in your document, such as the verbs and activity types and so forth. But the workflow is much smoother if you kind of work in your own document first, define your requirements. And oftentimes you might not be the only one working on the profile. So having something that multiple people can concurrently edit is very helpful too. There are a few profiles on the ADL profile server that use this template, such as the performance support profile. You might want to check that out in case you want to kind of see the end result of using this template. And I almost forgot to mention that creating this human readable version up front actually made it easier to populate the ADL profile server later on too, because you can simply copy and paste information from your document to the profile server interface because the structure is already there. Something else I wanted to mention when thinking about your data collection requirements is pay careful attention to designing and generating quality xAPI statements. Can't emphasize this enough. I published an article in Learning Solutions magazine not too long ago. It discusses best practices for xAPI statements. These are based on some of the most common inconsistencies we've seen over the years as an LRS vendor. And if addressed in a proactive manner, they can drastically help improve the quality of your data and your reporting. Number 4 there on the list, unique identifiers, is definitely one of the most important ones. But also related to this is what you name things. And when using the display property in xAPI statements, it's extremely important too, especially for activities. But I didn't include it in this original article at the time. I wanted to mention it. If you don't put some thought and time into strategically naming the activities that are tracked in xAPI, then it makes it much harder to find them later on. Often authoring tools will do this and generate very generic or non-descriptive names for activities. And then it becomes very difficult to locate those later on. So definitely put some thought and effort into editing those if you can, not to pick on authoring tools. I mean, this goes for creating custom content as well. And by the way, we added an activity explorer in our LRS to kind of help users navigate activities more easily because of this default naming of activities is often not so great. If anyone would like to check that out. And then the link bottom here is a link to the article if you wanted to get into more details. And then also in that article are like some of the benefits of following these details and how it impacts your reporting by following those best practices. After you collected the data and stored it in LRS, you also want to think about how to get insights from the data to best support your reporting goals and evaluation strategy. This video link here is from one of my colleagues, Rob Chadwick. He has some sage advice. And I think it's actually from one of last year's cohorts and helps you think about how to strategically group data sets into buckets when computing metrics and then generating analytics over xAPI data. This is really something to start thinking about after the data has been collected, but I wanted to mention it here since it never hurts to be thinking ahead. Finally, here's the books I mentioned I've been digging into later that will help with your evaluation strategy and data collection requirements for xAPI. The TDRP framework I mentioned earlier is covered in the first two books. It was developed by several L&D leaders and is maintained by the Center for Talent Reporting. And the goal of this framework was to provide a standard for L&D measurement and reporting. And they were inspired by the fact that if you think about it, the accounting industry has standard measures and calculations for commonly used accounting and financial industries. So we need the same type of thing for L&D, right? Kind of makes sense. And then also be sure to check out these two articles that touch on xAPI and evaluation. Here, I think most of these have been recommended by Megan and the Torrance Learning team in previous cohorts, but thought I'd share them again here to highlight their importance. Okay, and I think that brings me to the end and hopefully leaves you all enough time with some questions and to jump into your team updates. Let me switch back here and ask if we had any results come up from the poll.
We've got some polls and some questions. Jamie, is there a way for AirMeet to show the polls in the presentation window, or how do we do that?
I don't think I can put it up on the stage, but everyone should be able to view it in the tab by the chat. There's a little graph like Megan said, and if you go to view event polls, you should be able to see those results.
Awesome. So Jason, one of the things that you asked was how often does your clients, your organization evaluate learning or training? We had 28% people said always. 43% said sometimes they evaluate, and 28% said never evaluate.
Wow, that seems kind of on par with what we're expecting. I mean, like, it's just been, like I said, one of those things, one of those parts of the ADDIE model that have been neglected for so long for various reasons, but not surprising.
Yeah, and I think, I've also seen, when we didn't have great data, we didn't report great data all the time. And now that we have great data, we need to get that muscle back. So some of the resources that you shared would be good for that. Your second question was, do you plan to use xAPI as a key part of your data collection and evaluation strategy? You got 50-50. So 50% said, yes, we're planning to use xAPI as a key part of our data collection and evaluation. And 50% we're not sure or don't have a strategy yet, but nobody said no. I think
Fantastic.
That might be a factor of your audience too.
Fantastic. Well, it seems like the second question may help improve the numbers of the first question eventually here over time.
Yes. Yes. So, all right. So we've got some questions. I am going to bring you this question from Martin. Can you give an example of what kind of xAPI statements would be used for scenario-based assessments?
Hey, great question, Martin. Actually, there is, we've been working with some clients and they have developed recently a simulation profile, a base simulation profile, and then a scenario-based simulation profile. I haven't published it to the ADL profile server yet because it's kind of massive. It's got a lot in it, but it's more geared towards a simulation type of scenario. If you want to reach out to me, I will share that with you, at least see if I can share a draft of it with you, and it will give you a better idea, like the statements that are in there and kind of things you can measure.
Very cool. And can we just reach out to you in the Slack cohort?
Yep, that works too.
Very cool. Okay, very cool. Thank you. Next question, and our last question before we get to team updates. Is there a way to get involved in the work that you're doing on the performance support profile?
Yeah, definitely. Reach out to me in Slack. That profile was published. It could definitely evolve, and I'm sure there are other types of interactions and different types of performance support applications that we didn't think of that could be added. We kind of built that one geared towards some mobile performance support things that had been built and that we wanted to add, such as I think I mentioned one earlier, like searching an application and selecting certain terms and finding out how people drilled down using the user interface of the mobile support performance support application. Then you can kind of get to those level 0 utilization metrics that I mentioned earlier and find out, hey, where are people going? Where are people reaching back for support related to doing their job? It was kind of built with some of those things in mind, but there's definitely room for expanding it. The best way is reach out to me and I'll get in touch with ADL. And what they can do is they can add you as a contributor to that profile, and then you can make updates to it, and we could actually coordinate around requirements for it if you've got some that you'd like to add.
Very, very cool. Very cool. And Matt put a link in the chat to the performance support profile. So for folks who are thinking, neat, but I'm really not ready to get involved, you can just read it. So that's helpful too. So Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us at Cohort with some really useful stuff. And I think this is something that as our teams are starting to get their data and getting it actually collected, this is some useful stuff for them as well. So thank you again.
Hey, thank you for having me, and feel free to reach out anytime. I'm always glad to help.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So teams, as you are getting ready to present, remember to, if you are the presenter for your group, we will go in alphabetical order. Not all these teams has an update. Go ahead and raise your hand, activate your mic and your camera so we are good to go. Once again, if you want to see, if you're like, where are these teams? You go into Slack, you'll need to click the plus on the channels in order to browse channels. And then you can just scroll down that list till you get to the ones that start with team. So let's take a look. We have Martin with a quick update on Team CMI5 Create an AU.
Hello. Oops.
We gotcha. There you go.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so just a quick summary. So I've been trying to get Catapult installed on an M1 MacBook Pro and got some help from Peter and Brian to get that going. So now I can start testing out things. And so I've actually got a desktop application that will get the URL, the launching URL from the LMS. It'll start it up and I get all of the parameters from it. So I get the fetch URL. So I'm just all about ready to connect to the LRS. Or because all of the stuff in the fetch URL. And so I've got some next steps before we're actually sending statements to the LRS, but it's going well. And the final thing I just want to say is, or two more things, the instructional designers. Is there any instructional designers who have some ideas that they want to do to send out statements that we could use? And the final thing is we're maybe changing the meeting date. So there's a link to the time, to a time poll, day and time poll. So that's my update so far.
Awesome. Awesome. I love to see this team going. So well done. Amy Parent, you are up for Team Data Analytics.
Hello.
Hello.
Sorry, it was a small panic. Yeah, so really quick, we had a meeting last week. We have started to narrow in on two things: what data we want to work with for data analytics and how we're going to get it. So our next steps are to generate a simple prototype tool for creating some xAPI data, and then also pull in other kinds of data to do a little bit of data analytics. If you have some bulk data that you think could be valuable to our team, just chat us on over.
Super, super cool. I love it. If you got some data, send it to us. Thank you very much, Amy. We'll see you in a few weeks, actually, as our cohort presenter. Team Free Code Camp has actually joined forces with Team H5P. So we will catch up with them over on that update. Team H5P is looking at how to create some plugins to be able to use it on WordPress and Moodle and Unreal. And so there's some overlap with the Team Unreal Engine as well. Also looking at adding a secondary group to the project and getting all sorts of different things going on. Basically looking at what xAPI data can we collect, and then starting to they've got Veracity set up as their LRS and looking at some of that plugin documentation and seeing how they're going to do it. So Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern is when they meet, if there is anybody interested in joining that group. Team elton has a storyline module. It is sending some xAPI statements that capture, I won't read this whole thing to you, but capture different aspects of the LTEM model, so the learning transfer evaluation model, which captures many of the same kinds of data that Jason Haag was talking about today. It also has a level 0, which are a level 1. And so they're looking at using a wide variety of ways to capture and then visualize data from Storyline aligned with that particular evaluation model. So Team More Than Scorm, Kay, are you up? Yes.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So Team More Than Scorm, we are really making some good headway. This week, we created a software simulation to add to our existing Storyline test file that also includes a few assessment questions and includes a question bank. So moving forward, we will continue to combine. We're combining the files into one Storyline file, and we'll publish for LMS as scorm to load into Scorm Cloud for testing. So we're gearing up for testing soon.
Very, very cool. We can't wait to see what you come up with. Very, very cool. Thanks, Kay. Team Storyline Beginner Bring Your Own Project is working on exactly that, bring in your own project. So Sarah Moore, who's one of the people who bring in her own project, is looking at tracking a variety of different triggers and probably going to use Scorm Cloud as her LRS of choice for this phase of her project. So this is work that she has already gotten a head start on from previous cohorts as well. Team Unreal Engine is kind of reorganizing the team, and it's dynamic. That team is meeting right after cohort this week. If there is yeah, and I think Shauna is not feeling well. Oh, thanks, Sarah. Shauna's not feeling well, so not here to do the update, I believe. But that team looks like they're going to be doing some cool stuff. Team xAPI Developer Tools has been doing a lot of different things. And Mark is looking at having some demos available soon to be able to show folks. So teams, this is fantastic. Martin, I agree. So many teams with so many cool projects at so many different levels of engaging with xAPI. So be sure, invite your colleagues and friends to sign up. Join us back here next week, 2 to 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Join us for our xAPI party, May 6th, Learning Solutions Conference, April 21st. I will see you there. And if you have questions or need help, you can either message Jamie, Matt, and I in Slack or send us an email if you need help with that. With that, everybody get out there and make something cool. Have a fantastic week, a lovely weekend, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.